everyone, welcome back. This time we are doing a review for 2018's Halloween, the third Halloween movie with that title. So now we have to refer to this one as 2018 Halloween. This is Chris. With me this time is Jason.
Hello.
I think was that hello or just hell?
Hey, it was hello.
Okay. Sound like you're saying hell. Jason, I'm glad. Now, it's kind of funny because this was on the list for us to review. I put it on there very early on. I think as far back as last January. Waiting for one of you guys to bite and do a review with me on this movie, and finally I'm just like, Jason, will you please? No one would take it. No one would take it. I didn't understand. I was like, God, this is going to be a return to form. This is a big deal. This is not like this is not like Halloween 6. All right, this is supposed to be a return and a new true sequel to the original 40 years later, ignoring the rest. And putting this one in its place, I'm like, come on! And like, I just remember, like, as the months go on, I'm like, oh, guys, sign up for this Halloween. It's going to be great. It's John Carpenter. He's doing the score, but he's signing off on this. And then finally, I just came to him like, Jason, would you do this? And you agreed to it. I'm glad you did. You're the person I wanted to do a review with. Jason, overall, your feelings. Now, you and I come from very, I'd say, distinct enough generational gap. There's about 20 years difference between us, but you and I still enjoy a lot of the same things. But something like this, when it comes to the culture and growing up with horror movies, we both really enjoy them, but we come from different backgrounds. So I was really interested to hear what you thought of this movie. What did you think of Halloween?
Well, I didn't know jack diddly about the original. I've never seen it. It was one of those movies that was, it was old when I was young. So like,
it was very old when I was young. You're still irking me a little bit every time you refer to Jamie Lee Curtis as the grandmother.
Well, that's what she is. She's the grandma.
She is, but I mean, again, that comes from that difference of background when it comes to movies in general. It's like, yeah, that's Jamie Lee Curtis. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But I enjoyed it for what it was. It was a solid horror movie. It had a good blending of like sort of classic American horror with sort of the newer styles of horror. It didn't sort of rely on one trick like a lot of these horror movies do. It didn't just rely on jump scares or on like suspense throughout the whole movie, playing off of something, like the suspense built up to an event, the jump scares weren't too common. So the fact that, you always felt like there was a potential for something to be coming around the corner, but there was just as much of a potential for nothing to be around the corner, which really put you off edge. The soundtrack was phenomenal. I can't overstate that. The soundtrack was probably one of, if not my favorite part to this movie.
Well, and I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because that is where John Carpenter he signed off on this. Obviously, the creator of the original, but he did the score with he did it with somebody else, but he designed the score, which is. Back in the day, back in the Stone Age, Jason, in the 70s and the 80s, you had to rely heavily on that. There wasn't a lot of CGI, if any at all. It was all practical effects, but something that was built up with mood quite often was the sound, the soundtrack and the score that went behind it. And that's part of what really gives this that original Halloween feel that does it. They do it quite well, I agree.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the soundtrack never felt out of place, and it was always complementing the scene that it was in. Even some of the scenes that were not as great, I think were definitely improved overall by the choice of music in there. I'm a big audiophile. If the soundtrack doesn't work for me, it takes me out of the whole movie. But this is beautifully on the spot. Yeah, overall, it definitely the best horror movie I've seen this year, hands down.
All right. Well, that's saying a lot. Also because we got Overlord right around the corner, so and that's going to be our last combination of reviewers this year's. We'll be doing Overlord. We're going to see where that's going to fit because that was supposed to come out right around the same time, but they pushed it back to November.
I'm looking forward to that one.
I know. Nazi zombies. You can't get enough of that. Overall, I agree. I think in large part this is a really good movie. It has been a while since I've seen any of the Halloween movies, except for kind of ironic. It's a running theme in this movie talking about the boogeyman and believing in the boogeyman. And actually, earlier this week, I just caught that whole scene with from the original Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis and the kid, and she's babysitting. And they actually have the whole conversation about the boogeyman and believing in the boogeyman, and Laurie just taking the stance of, it's the boogeyman. It's not real. Or don't worry about it. I'll protect you. I'm your babysitter. I'll protect you from the boogeyman. I think that was probably an important scene just to see alone. If not seeing the whole movie. I hadn't seen the original Halloween in a long time, but that was kind of ironic because that obviously plays a big role of fear and believing in the horrors of something, almost to a supernatural extent, which is something that we see here.
Yeah. Fear has a way of messing with your head.
Yeah.
Which can make think, as a way of messing with how we rationalize things, about how we deal with things, and even to a degree how we interpret reality as we're seeing it unfold before us. And you and I will get into this a little bit more in the spoiler-heavy review, but there was a lot of sort of back and forth that I had to do about certain portrayals of Michael Myers and whether that was supposed to be actually what we were seeing or whether that was through the lens of fear from the characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is something that the Halloween films have tried to do. We talked about this a little bit before about doing the review. They've always tried to be a little bit more grounded. Michael Myers he certainly hangs out in the lobby with all the other horror creatures of Jason and Freddy and in ones of that generation. Pinhead and the such. But it's funny because he's supposed to be just a guy, and it is that psychologically that he could be so sinister and so evil, but he's just a guy, and I think that works on a completely different level than most of the other movies. Now that being said, one of my cons to this is actually a regular con that I've had with Michael Myers over the years and how he's portrayed, and they do it here unfortunately too. And I don't think they really needed to, where he obviously is given some superhuman kind of strength. He's given some kind of super endurance. He takes a lot of damage, like he's wearing a full suit of armor. These are things that I don't, and in some cases he reacts to these things appropriately. In other cases, it's just kind of like, geez, the guy's invincible, quite often. And I understand it kind of plays on some of the old school things that they used to do in horror movies. I think, I would like to think that we're a little bit past that at this point. But we're not. We still get a lot of that, and overall it's fine, and it doesn't ruin the movie at all. It's a very good movie, but I was kind of let down to see that. Michael Myers takes a lot here. I mean, it's almost to the level of Jason in some of his movies, in the amount of damage that he takes, which is kind of interesting early on in those movies because you weren't totally sure what was going on with Jason, and then clearly as time has gone on, you find out that he is some kind of undead monster who will just keep going no matter what. That is not the case here, and he takes a lot of damage, and so that so it doesn't really work really well with the whole grounded kind of, this is a serial killer, this is a psychopath. And at the same time, there does seem like, I don't know, you tell me how you feel about this, it does seem like whenever he's around, there's some kind of good luck, bad luck kind of aura going, where even if he's in the vicinity, his victim or would-be victim is obviously having a horrible amount of bad luck, where he's having a good amount of good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. What really bothered me though was is that some of the more major twists in the film felt very predictable.
Hmm.
Like some of the big ones I saw from like very early on in the film. I could have called it out in the middle of the theater and been like, "That's gonna happen," like they weren't exactly subtle with most of the bigger twists, which
Yeah.
kind of left me a little disappointed because I kept waiting for that big one that's going to be like, oh, surprise! And the tension and the horror were good, but there was no gotcha moment, and that really disappointed me. Yeah, I was waiting
Yeah.
for the gotcha moment that never came.
It is
Um,
kind of obvious, and yeah, obviously we're trying not to spoil that. Yeah, there is a twist that is very much not a twist. It's kind of funny because this movie overall, there's actually some straight up brilliant writing in this film, but at the same time, there's several moments that just aren't all that great. It's kind of it ironically it's kind of a mix of with everything else that goes on with this film, there's a lot of great mix of classic and new school kind of horror. But at the same time, with horror, there's some great moments and there's some really bad moments as well. There's just straight up some sloppiness going on in this as well.
yeah. The one thing I will say is that the action and the tension in the fights is very good.
Yeah,
And the development of these characters, I really enjoyed. There was a lot more depth to them than we usually get in horror movies, and I
definitely.
really enjoyed having fleshed out Laurie's character in particular. Wow, was probably my favorite. Um, she genuinely felt like someone who had survived a severely traumatic event, and the actions that she takes as a result of surviving that felt believable, and
Hmm.
realistic and grounded to what a person might do and the reactions that they might make. Um, and the action straight up, especially towards the end of the movie where things pick up the pace, really can't overstate how much I enjoyed that. Um, the ending wrapped things up very succinctly, in a very sort of classic horror style.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if it's spoilers to say this or not, but it could swing either way. It's sort of that like classic horror film where it's like, either you could take this as a conclusion to the movie, or you could take it as them keeping their foot in the door for maybe, putting another one out there.
That's true. In fact, honestly, that's one of the things I don't I don't think I liked that. I'm not totally sure how I feel about that yet. It is very class. Excuse me. It is very classic horror where the ending, as definitive as they're trying to make it be as a definitive ending, is also a bit ambiguous. And I kind of would have liked to have seen more. They've they've killed Michael Myers on a few occasions. There's been more than just this as far as a reboot in the Halloween movies. There's one, I think it was H2O, Halloween, 20 years, came out 20 years after the first, where Laurie just clean takes his head off. Okay, obviously that's nowhere in canon either. So yeah, something a little bit definitive I think would have been nice, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to say anything more than that. Yeah, no, but the character of Laurie and how they fleshed her out and the life that she lived is obviously a big part of the film, and they do it masterfully. Uh, and obviously with Jamie Lee Curtis, who doesn't always, but at certain times puts in just a brilliant performance, and did so here. She's the highlight, I would say. Um, yeah, yeah. Overall, I agree. This was a pretty good one. Um, I one thing in particular I want to know, just kind of like how this movie plays really well on what you think is going to happen versus surprises. Early on in the film, that we are shown the beginning of the movie is kind of starts through the perspective of a couple reporters who are, I guess I should say reporters, journalists, who are doing a piece on Michael Myers. with the acknowledgement that they're approaching 40 years since the original killings. There's a really interesting scene that I don't want to spoil too much, but I'm going to spoil a little bit here, where you have your almost classic Michael Myers moment of terror with one of the journalists, but then you have the other one who's kind of caught up to what's going on, and he reacts very appropriately, especially as someone who's been studying Michael Myers and is obviously doing a piece on him, where he approaches him with a crowbar, gives him, you have that intrigue of a reporter. What's gonna happen if I actually give him just a moment to acknowledge what he's doing, but then reacts perfectly after just that 1 second and realize, yeah, this is Michael fucking Myers. He's not going to stop what he's doing, and then just goes at him with a crowbar. Then you've got the magical Michael Myers who just kind of shrugs it off. But it's a great moment early on. And it's a good analogy for the movie as a whole, I think. This is a really good one. So, Jason, are you ready to score?
Yeah, I can't get over the fact that you just put that a good analogy for the movie is being beaten to death with a crowbar.
Am I wrong?
I mean, no, but it sounds like you have to understand the way you phrased that made it sound like you really didn't like the movie.
I did.
Yeah, that movie got beaten to death with a crowbar. I loved it. 10 out of 10.
Well, all right. So let's go with that. Actually, no. We will do 1 out of 10 old William Shatner masks.
I'm gonna go with a solid 8.5. 8.5 creepy old masks out of 10.
All right. I'm gonna go with an 8. I really enjoyed it. This is a good one. If you get a chance to see it this Halloween season, you should, and if you don't, you should definitely rent or stream it. This was a lot of fun. This is definitely worth watching if you're a horror fan in the slightest. Yeah, so let us know what you think, though. What did you think of this film? Go ahead and comment below if you liked our review. If you could please subscribe and give us a like, that'd be great. But I think that's going to do it for now. Any last words, Jason?
Yeah. Don't trust creepy doctors, folks.
Okay. All right. We spent a good amount of time dancing around that, Jason. For you to just bring it up at the end is great. I'm leaving it in. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Hey people, thank you for tuning into this episode and taking a listen. If you like our content, if you like what you're listening to, is there anything to go over, hey, please, we would not only love to hear more from you, but if great if you could throw some support. You can subscribe right below. Also, you can toss us a line anytime. That's ksongmedia@gmail.com. Of course, you can tune in for our channel anytime for movie reviews, game reviews, a lot of random wacky stuff. Yeah, who knows what you'll hear. And of course, our episode each week where we're bringing the nerdiest things we can find, dig up, and maybe not find. Maybe the stuff that just drops in our laps. But anyway, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We hope to hear from you again later. Take care.